Alrighty then. Good evening, everybody. Been a while since I've done one of these here streamos, but I thought under the circumstances one was warranted, and where to even begin in describing these quote circumstances. First, Trump has conceded the election. He did so about an hour ago. And I'm hoping there isn't some desperate attempt to parse his words to determine whether he actually conceded the election, because he acknowledged that there will be a transition of power on January 20th. So maybe he won't ever be able to bring himself to utter the precise words, "I hereby concede the election." But that's a concession. And there are a few things to say about it. First, in light of the utter explosion of hysteria yesterday, Trump conceding within around 24 hours of the supposed coup attempt, I think should highlight to you that what occurred yesterday at the Capitol building was not anything even remotely resembling a quote coup attempt. And I wrote a Medium piece on this today that I have links to in the description box, so please give that a read. But there are a few things happening here. The term coup or coup attempt has been wildly distorted for the purpose, I would posit, of sowing the maximum amount of hysteria possible. And as usual, the corporate media are the ringleaders in propagating this term, in addition to Democrats and now even many Republicans. They so easily will just throw out terms like coup attempt, terms like insurrection, terms like domestic terror, and none of it actually describes what occurred yesterday. What occurred yesterday was a mob comprised of a combination of amped up conspiracy goofballs, of misled partisans, and other assorted guys, primarily, who stormed the Capitol. Okay, yeah, that's unusual. That doesn't happen frequently. That's something to acknowledge as a somewhat unprecedented event in recent, at least, American history. But the idea that you're going to then melt into a puddle of paranoia over it, I don't think is particularly wise. So if it was a coup attempt, you would think that a coup attempt, at least per the traditionally understood definition of the term, would entail a forcible attempt to seize the reins of the state. That's what a coup is. That's what occurred in July of 2016 in Turkey, where there came close to a forcible deposition of the sitting government. There was no attempt here to seize the reins of the United States federal government, storming the Capitol building and temporarily disrupting the proceedings of Congress, while unusual, while certainly a little wild, actually a lot wild, is not an action which could bring about the toppling of the United States government. And it's bizarre that I even have to spell this out, but apparently I do, because this terminology is so flooding the popular consciousness right now that we need at least someone to provide a little bit of a clarification. You have members of Congress tweeting that they tried to overthrow the government. Really? Overthrow the government? What does the government consist of? Gee, I don't know. The Pentagon, the National Security Agency, the CIA, the FBI, the presidency. Were any of those at risk of being toppled yesterday because a bunch of yahoos managed to overwhelm the undermanned Capitol Police Force that had been stationed outside the building on that particular day? And by the way, who has jurisdiction over the Capitol Police? That would be the Congress, or in other words, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. So if there was an inadequate presence to fend off the mob yesterday, the logistical blame, you would think, would fall to some extent at the feet of the leadership in Congress, but apparently nobody's really thought in those terms yet. And so the basic idea here is that to say this was a coup attempt is just so far removed from what an actual coup attempt would look like that it's an absurdity. If you take a few seconds to think about it and not be guided exclusively by your hysterical, momentary, fleeting passions, then I think you should be able to recognize that this was not a bona fide coup attempt by any stretch of the imagination. Now, again, was it unusual? Was it irregular? Yeah. But at least have a little bit of sanity in how these things are characterized. So what is the function then of putting forth this incredibly inflammatory, unfactual characterization? Well, if you can depict what transpired as a genuine coup attempt, well, gee whiz, that would be quite scary, wouldn't it? That might require some aggressive action to remediate, such as, I don't know, new policies to censor the internet, censor social media, where it's being suggested that this so-called coup attempt, or at least the mob, was organized. So they want a really forceful purge of social media in the aftermath of this, which they were doing anyway, but now it's going to ramp up to new heights. Already occurred because Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I think I even saw Shopify or some other shopping app all simultaneously ban Trump. Although, at least on Twitter, they let him back today. He's off Facebook for the time being, but they let him on Twitter back, which is, of course, his most prized venue. It appears like in exchange for conceding the election. Maybe that wasn't the exact agreement brokered, but Trump had to get rid of some, bonkers tweets he did yesterday, condemning Mike Pence, condemning everything and everybody. And then he comes out tonight with this statement read off a teleprompter in distinctly un-Trumpian fashion. I mean, you could always tell when Trump is not actually reciting his own words, but just relaying what has been written for him. He does that, and then he magically gets his Twitter account back. Okay, and I think I I think there's a strong likelihood. I hope they don't, but I think there's a strong likelihood that Twitter does just ban him outright the minute he leaves office. So like 12:01 Eastern Standard Time on January 20th. But that's just one of many potential ramifications of this that I think explains why there are so many politicians, why there are so many pundits and journalists and others who are so dead set on portraying this as something far more extreme and threatening than it really was. I mean, please, this was a temporary interruption spanning a couple of hours to Congress's workday. And guess what? It never stood the slightest chance of preventing the certification of Joe Biden as president, which went forward a few hours later. Much less, I mean, come on, overthrowing the government. I almost think people don't even know really what the government is if they even say with a straight face that that's a legitimate possibility. And if Donald Trump had wanted a coup to be launched on his behalf, he behaved in the total opposite way as you would expect if he was trying to make that come to fruition. He did this speech in D.C. yesterday afternoon before the meeting of the joint session of Congress to certify the Electoral College results. And for one thing, this is really funny, actually, and also sad. He says in this speech, among other things, that he will be right alongside the marchers as they make their way to the Capitol. He'll be with them. He'll be joining them. That's what he pledged. That's what he promised. And what did he do? Well, he went home and watched TV and tweeted. That's all he really ever does, it seems. So it was just a typical routine day for him, except that he didn't get to go and get in a few rounds of golf, which would be more typical of a day for him. Now, if he was trying to orchestrate a coup, don't you think he might have spent the past 2 months or so, I don't know, planning a coup? He didn't do any of that. He didn't try to recruit loyalists within the government who could splinter off and then, I don't know, challenge Mike Pence or anything. He just complained. He never had the concentration or the discipline or the ideological coherence or the organizational aptitude to do anything even approaching a coup, which is a highly complicated, complex endeavor. I don't think you're going to get a coup just by whinging on Twitter and watching Newsmax and ranting on the phone to whomever. So the coup never happened. This was not a coup yesterday at the Capitol. It was a temporary disruption. And guess what? It was quickly and resolutely dispersed by who? Armed agents of the state. And now a lot of people who broke into the Capitol and, ransacked offices, posed for goofy selfies and photo ops, they are going to be prosecuted. And if you want to call that a coup attempt, I would contend that all you're doing is intentionally inflating the threat of what has gone on because you have a second order agenda to pursue, which I would also contend consists primarily of punishing your perceived enemies, humiliating Trump to the maximal extent possible, and instituting censorship / curtailments on civil liberties, which are in accordance with your plan to so-called make sure this never happens again. Meaning make sure that there can't be any kind of quote-unquote threat in this fashion ever again, and everybody just kind of falls in line. And you have Jake Tapper, I just saw a little while ago on CNN, referring to what's going on at this juncture as, quote, a MAGA terrorist insurrection? Really? Insurrection? A bunch of knuckleheads doing a little kind of, I don't know, joyful spree through the Capitol and then being kicked out and arrested and prosecuted. That's an insurrection? Wow, the country must be in really good shape. It must be immune to insurrections if that is the best insurrectionary activity that the right wing, let's say, can muster. No, this is all meant to, whether consciously or not, I think it's some combination of the two, although a lot of people are deluded enough that they genuinely believe that this was a bona fide coup attempt. But I think the ultimate effect of it is that they want you to continue clicking and viewing their videos and watching their TV and giving money and all the other kind of, they want to squeeze everything out of the populace as much as they can for the remaining few days that Trump is still in office. I mean, CNN had its highest viewership ever on record yesterday. So not any presidential election surpassed that, surpassed 9/11, surpassed any news event you could think of. Yesterday, January 6th, was their most watched day of broadcasting ever in their history since 1983 or something. Was that when they were founded? Now that's a payday. That is a lot of money flowing into the coffers of CNN. So, of course, Jake Tapper saying something like MAGA terrorist insurrection. Gee, that's going to attract some eyeballs. Now, I'm sure if he was in front of me right now, he would have a, rational sounding explanation for why that term is apt. But you can't detach the financial incentive from all this. It's intrinsic. And I just got a notification on my phone. I don't know why I even have notifications on my phone, frankly. I don't remember even putting them on. But now Betsy DeVos has submitted her resignation. Elaine Chao submitted her resignation earlier. A bunch of other White House underlings also resigned in protest. You have Bill Barr denouncing Trump earlier today, saying he betrayed his office and his supporters. You have Mike Pence, who was condemned by Trump yesterday and attacked, supposedly privately grousing about how he can't believe how Trump has treated him. John Kelly, his former chief of staff, who'd already been highly critical, is now going after Trump in the most strident possible terms. Ted Cruz criticized him. Everybody is really going after Trump. Trump is a man on an island at this time. And that's why I think he probably cucked and decided, even though he said he would never concede, he conceded. And it looks like the proximate impetus for that concession was that he really wanted his Twitter account back. And in that, I have to say I relate to you, Donald J. Trump, because I could also see myself giving up the most powerful office in the history of the world if it was required to regain control of my Twitter account. Because like all I really care about is tweeting. That's not quite true, but I do have sympathy for Trump's clear addiction to Twitter. It has its upsides and its downsides, but if you're in a pickle, like he found himself in over the past 24 hours, it can be used as a point of leverage to extract a concession from you. And so at least he'll be able to keep posting, at least until January 20th, when I bet he'll have the Twitter account banned regardless. So he'll 13 more days in the sun. So I'll have other things to say about this whole post-election period. I mean, one of the reasons I haven't done a video in a while because I was sick of being flooded with, I guess, the more conspiratorial or right-wing element of my commenters and viewers and so forth, just being convinced to almost metaphysical certitude that the election was stolen on the basis of just evidence or affidavits or any BS that they have been spoon-fed by these moronic scam artists who they almost wanted to be manipulated by. They wanted lies. I don't know why, even if it contravenes, or I guess I do know why, but I would encourage you to at least try to not be in a position where, because it confirms your pre-existing biases or preferences, that you want BS just thrown in your face by media figures or politicians or whomever who are willing to just deceive you. You want to be deceived? Really? I can't tell you how many comments I've gotten on YouTube, Twitter, email, elsewhere since November 3rd, telling me with 100% absolute confidence that Trump would win somehow after he lost on November 3rd, or after he was formally, or not formally, but after he was declared the winner, in effect, a few days later. There was this crusade led by Trump himself and abetted by profit-seeking charlatans who made a lot of money by promoting these fantasies, to say that he would win somehow, whether it was through the courts. The Supreme Court was just going to declare Trump the winner, apparently, and 9-0, they all even rejected to hear the Texas case. The Electoral College was going to send different slates of electors. The fraud was going to be so overwhelming that the states weren't going to certify the electors in the first place. And then finally, this madcap scheme in the Congress to reject the certification of the Electoral College. I mean, the thing is, most of these people, like Ted Cruz, like Josh Hawley, they all knew that it was never going to work. They all knew that it wasn't actually going to change the outcome. I think Trump might be so deluded that he maybe did think that there was a possibility that all of this stuff was going to change the outcome. Who knows? But there's no way guys like Cruz and Hawley did. And also other people in the media and the sort of MAGA world. But what did they do? They manipulated and exploited and fleeced Trump supporters by peddling them these delusions for their own gain. I mean, Trump has now fundraised hundreds of millions of dollars since the election with these frantic apocalyptic texts, emails, tweets, on the basis of just insane lies that any of it was going to be used to overturn the election results and prevent Biden from taking office. No, it's all in his slush fund right now. He just conceded the hundreds of millions of dollars are, guess what, sitting in his slush fund. The Save America PAC. So, I mean, if you enjoy being victimized like that, examine your own psyche, because it's not healthy. And this fraud pilling of so much of the country has just mired them in a hallucinatory stupor. So I am reasonably confident that there are many, many millions of people who, hearing Trump concede tonight, are stunned beyond belief. Maybe they can't believe it. Maybe they think that the Trump who conceded on their computers or phones or TV screens was a hologram, because they had been assured for over 2 months that that was not going to be the case. So it's actually kind of sad and pathetic. And I tried to guide at least some of you on to a better course, but I don't know if it particularly worked. What I did know is it didn't particularly work for Trump, who's now discredited himself, toxic even within the GOP. Maybe he could do some rehabilitation tour later on, but I doubt it. I mean, the Democrats are probably going to impeach him again, which is amazing. And it won't just be Democrats this time. Trump will likely be impeached. I don't know if it's likely, but there's a decent likelihood, if not maybe even a very good likelihood, that Trump will be impeached again, and he might well be removed from office. A first in U.S. history. First of all, it would be by far a first for him to be impeached twice. Impeached with less than 2 weeks to go is like mind-boggling. And I think you're going to have a couple of senators. I think there's. Oh, look, I don't know if you have enough senators, enough Republican senators who would vote to convict him in the Senate, but it will be reasonably close. So, what has this fraud pilling accomplished for Trump or Trump supporters or anybody? Didn't succeed in overturning a single state's election results. Didn't succeed in preventing the certification of Biden. Did succeed in losing the Republicans their majority in the Senate, because guess what? If you tell voters in Georgia that the entire election system is rigged, there's a pretty good chance that at least some portion of them are going to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to even bother voting in this upcoming election because the whole thing is rigged as per the constant proclamations of the Republican president and all these other, Republican figures in his orbit. So the Republicans lost the Senate, and then when the mob stormed the Capitol yesterday, it did succeed in persuading a number of senators who had otherwise stated that they were going to join the election contest effort. It persuaded them to give up and no longer challenge the certification of the results from various states. Kelly Loeffler, who on the eve of the Georgia Senate elections appeared with Trump at his rally and triumphantly declared that she was going to join in contesting the elections. I guess she felt she had to do that in order to rile up Republican voters. She dourly came out last night and said that in light of the mob attack, she was no longer going to do it. And so a group of Republican members of Congress rose up when it came time to count the electors from Georgia, and so they no longer had a senator to join in their objection. So same goes for Nevada, same goes for Michigan, same goes for Wisconsin. All they were able to do was Arizona. And in the middle of the Arizona objection, when Senator James Lankford was speaking, came the mob. And then that changed everything. Not that it changed the ultimate outcome. Of course, the results were always going to be certified for Biden. But it discredited the cause. So all you fraud-pilled people out there, tell me what you gained from all this. When Trump says he fought, okay, he fought. But if I fight for something ridiculous and stupid and futile, is that a smart fight to wage? Or am I just blowing a bunch of hot air and making everybody else look stupid, including myself. Now you have the Wall Street Journal editorial page calling on Trump to either resign immediately or be impeached and convicted. I mean, it's a lot of it was predictable. None of it, in a few things were predictable. The total backfiring of all this fraud mania on Trump supporters, those who promoted it. By the way, if you follow any right-wing media accounts and they fed you these lies for 2 months straight, take note of who they were and know that they are willing to deceive you for profit. Okay? I'm not going to name names. I don't do internet drama if I can avoid it. But just bear that in mind. I would propose to you. So the backfiring of that whole farce was wholly predictable, but so was this incredible overreaction to something yesterday that was, again, a zany mob outburst. Somebody did die, but it was a Trump supporting woman who was shot point blank in the throat by a Capitol police officer and is now dead. So no members of Congress were attacked. There is now a report that apparently a Capitol police officer was killed. Don't know exactly under what circumstances. So, I mean, it was a significant event, but it wasn't a coup. Like, you should be able to hold multiple thoughts in your head at one time in order to at least accurately convey to your readers and followers and viewers the reality of what occurred. It wasn't a coup. There was never even an attempt to overthrow the government. Still a significant event. I think people are adults and they can handle that formulation. And it was so predictable that now the overreaction, the hysterical overreaction to that event is going to be far more consequential than the event itself, which ultimately was just a disruption of Congress for a few hours. Didn't achieve anything of long-lasting consequence, except that a lot of those people are going to be in prison for a while. All right. That'll do it for now. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Checking the super chats. Don't see anything. All right. Read that piece that I linked to in the description box, and I will talk to you soon. I'll do this a little more regularly now that the fraud issue is resolved, or at least the election contestation issue is resolved, because that was really getting quite annoying and tedious. All right, bye.